up, guys? Let me just, sorry, I was on the wrong monitor. What's up, guys? There we go. Let me just, sorry, I was on. How you guys doing today? I'm excited today because I'm gonna do some paint overs. And a bunch of you sent me some really awesome paintings, and I'm stoked to do that. And it's, I know we're like in the middle of this castle painting, but this week I've been pretty slammed, so I wanted to kind of break things up, do some paint overs today, give some like feedback and critiques, and then we can get back to that castle next week. So thank you for everyone who sent me paintings. This one's pretty badass. This is Sava's painting, Sava Ziskliv. I pronounce your last name wrong every time, but Sava Ziskovic. But he's a badass artist and an awesome person. If you haven't seen his work, he did the IFCC opening titles, and I guess he just took my matte painting course and had asked if I would do a critique. So I figured this would be the perfect place because then everyone can kind of learn from the notes that I give him. And I have a couple others lined up as well, and we'll just see how many we get through. Sava, I'm sorry, dude. Sorry I butchered your name. Sava Ziskovic. Close enough. Okay, good. And we have Joe helping with questions. So if you guys have questions throughout the stream, just post them and he'll filter those out for me, and so that I can make sure I hit everything. Well, I guess let's dive into this painting. I was really excited actually to do a paint over on this because it is such a cool painting, and I love when something's at like the 90% mark, and then it's just a matter, like everything's already working in here, and then it's just a matter of seeing what we can do to take it up a notch, what we can do to bring it to the next level. And with this one specifically, I mean, yeah, everything's working, but there were a couple things that caught my eye, little things to pay attention to, and one of the big things is just the lighting. The composition is working great. The perspective is fantastic. It's really great elements. It tells a very cool story. It moves your eye around the canvas in a really nice way. So now it's just about those technical details. And the thing that caught my eye with that was really these background mountains. Right now, these background mountains look like they're backlit from the right, when everything else has a pretty strong lighting from the left, or at least the structure has a strong lighting from the left, and the rest is kind of a little flat lit. So I think just fixing some lighting on these mountains, and also I think we can do a little bit more with this sky to really push it. So I'm gonna jump in here. First thing I'm gonna do actually is do a little sky replacement. The sky is cool, but one of the issues is the sky is hurting your scale. Like right over here, we're looking underneath the clouds, and really that would be much higher above us. So I'm going to swap out the sky real quick and just do some quick dirty mats. And again, while I'm doing this, please, if you guys have any questions or want me to ramble about anything, just hit up the chat. I think paint overs are like one of the most fun things to do. Someone else already did all the hard work, and you get to just go in there and have fun with it. So let me find a sky that might help the perspective a little bit. Actually, let's try this. Keep it in the same color tones. I might try a couple out and see what works and what doesn't. Maybe not that one. Let's try a couple others. That's nice because that has a little like God ray that can help us justify that strong lighting on the structure. So I'm going to line up the horizon of the sky, right, for the painting. We'll get that horizon working, and then I'll scale based on that horizon to see where it starts to feel natural. See if we go too small with it, it hurts the scale of the overall piece, because it does feel like these clouds should be right up above us, but we're looking straight forward. So doing something like that helps the perspective. I'll just try a couple out and we'll see what works best. This is like a sky I use way too often, but it's a really good sky, so. Yeah, let's try something like that. Just throw a little color correction on it. I hope you guys all had a good time this weekend and watched the fight. It was really fun. I got to spend it with some really good people, and I'm still recovering from it. But goddamn, it was a good time. And I'm just throwing a soft light on here to get that lighting a little more dramatic. And what we can do also is, I don't want to touch it too much, but we can play with that horizon color a little bit, since we're getting that cool light throughout this whole thing anyways. I think that sky alone will help you quite a bit just with the scale of this whole thing, and also making it less distracting, because really we want to focus on this, like, you know, it's this strong line and this very like alien looking structure. So you know, I think a sky can really help that out. And I mean, I think finding skies and finding the right sky is it's a difficult thing, and it takes a lot of trial and error. A lot of times I'll just try a ton of different ones until I find one that works. And Mike and Nick are laughing because they know I'm still recovering, and I hopefully they are too. Oh man, I hope that you guys aren't feeling 100% yet. Cool. So let's play with these mountains a bit. Actually, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna see about taking these out and swapping them out for a better element. It's not that this is a bad element, it's just that the lighting isn't there, and I think, you know, you could either flatten it out, but I also think there's an opportunity with these back mountains to find a better element. And just to make things a little easier on ourselves, I'm gonna just separate this out. JD, yeah, Saba took the course. He's also a good friend of mine, and he did this painting for an opening, like a little opening titles that he made. So he took the course and then used it to do a personal project. Yeah. Cool. Let's find some good mountains. Yeah, maybe something like this. This has, we can reverse this and get the same strong lighting that's going on. Get that left lighting in. And we could even match the composition too. It's not that far off. Let's try something like that. Just a little color correction, get it in that world. Question, did you spend much time studying architectural drawing, or did you spend a lot of time learning from reference or come up with interesting structural design? I'm definitely interested in architecture, but I think that came about through matte painting, through having to do a bunch of interesting structures. But since then, it's kind of gotten me into studying it a bit more. But coming up with great, interesting structures, that I wouldn't say that's something I do particularly strongly. Like, I try to do it well, but nowhere to the level of like Maxx or something like that. Actually, Maxim Zeskov's course has like really pushed me in that way, and yeah, I think it's actually made me a bit stronger in that. But it doesn't come naturally to me. Just throw a little sharpen on here. And I might just get a little more color in here, so I'll throw a soft light. And once I get this a little, like, pretty close to the foreground, it could go a little closer. But anyways, once I get it a little closer to the foreground, what I'll do is I'll add atmosphere once it's already color timed and working. So now that I have it like, okay, this is like pretty close, maybe we could tweak it a little bit more. But then from that point, now that I know that the element is working, then I'll grab like this horizon color and just put it right on top, and then maybe throw a mask on here so that I can kind of control like almost fake Z depth. And that just pushes it back while keeping it, within the color range. Or you could just take a brush and really, paint right on top. Maybe we'll throw one more mountain back there just to give it a little more depth. Let's try this one out. And this is such small stuff, just because he already got this painting working really nicely. Like, there's not a whole lot I would want to change to this whole thing. But these are just those little tweaks that I think would step it up. I like that you have this fog coming in on the right. It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. But and also what's nice about this is it kind of softens that heavy contrast between that rock and this structure, so it doesn't pull your eye as much as this strong focal point on the left. Trying to see if there's other things that I mean, I think in general, Saba, next time around, spend a bit more time on your masks. You know, that's something that's a bit of a giveaway. But I feel like if you got that stuff, if you just spent a little more time on that, it would be a lot crisper. This is my shitty mask, but wait, this whole thing might be my shitty mask. No, still, even here, I think you could find a little bit more natural blend points in here, and that would help it quite a bit. And it might just be something like blurring your edges a little bit or feathering your mask a little bit. So that your edges are the same sharpness as the actual interior details of the image. Because you have this like super crisp mask, but a little less crisp of an element. Yeah, and same thing here, like with these elements, this is nice, but in terms of lighting, it's kind of that same thing of like you have this, either you go with the complete ambient light, which you wouldn't have as harsh of shadows and highlights, or you match the lighting of the background and tone down these shadows so that, you know, that you have consistent lighting across the board. And you could go in here and get a bit more highlights going in here, just to emphasize that light direction. It's kind of one or the other, but if you are going to have strong highlights and shadows, just make sure that they're coming from the same source. And then the last thing that I'm going to throw in here, and this is a quick paint over because there's not a whole lot to do here. But I would say that I think this whole painting, and this probably doesn't go with the piece that you're making, but this whole painting could go really, like, it could help it a lot to throw a little bit of light and life in there, and that would help with the scale a lot. So here, let me grab some tiny lights for this. I'll just grab this and screen this, and then we can kind of shrink this down and find somewhere in here for it. You know, little places like this, and it doesn't have to be much, it could just be a little, but I feel like this would help it quite a bit, just to give scale. You can play with the colors of those lights. You could add that in a couple different places, and I feel like that would help this whole thing out a lot in terms of just feeling like a giant, massive structure by adding those lights around. A lot of that has to do with the story and the vibe that you're trying to tell. And if it's this giant, desolate, ancient artifact, then, you know, maybe you wouldn't have any of those lights. But as a painting, I feel like little things like that really can help give this just more visual interest. You know, something that captures your eye a little bit more in those lights that really start making you ask more questions. maybe that's not the best element for it, but I think something like that. And then we could always throw a color on top of here. So maybe we want to make these some sort of bluish, more alien looking. You know, something like that, just to give a little life to it. I think that's where the fun stuff really starts to come into play, when you're like, okay, what can I do to just add the little details to really step this up and really make this into a different kind of painting. Yeah, and this element has a bit too much like lens flare-y stuff on it, so I'm sure there's a lot better of elements we can use. But I think something like that is starting to give you something cool. And with that too, that gives you an opportunity to hit like another highlight. Maybe right on these edges. You can break up the highlight just a little bit and maybe brighten it up, but give it a little bit of breakup too. It's just like little details that'll catch your eye and give you more visual interest. Yeah, that and yeah, I didn't end up throwing some other mountains back here, but I feel like that would be the only other thing, just to give it a little more depth. But dude, this is a fantastic painting. I'm a big fan of it. Yeah, I think it's just those little things. So much of it's working, and now it's like it's putting those extra couple more hours into it to get the lighting working, work on those masks a bit more, and playing with a couple different skies so that it doesn't take away from that main structure. And I think I think you're just doing an awesome job on this. Yeah, even if it's supposed to be dead, so you can take away the lights, but what you can do instead is try adding just something for scale. And if that's like little scaffolding or something here, or something human about it, or not human, but something to show some sort of scale. So even if it was like tiny details, you know, little things that kind of hint to you the scale of the whole thing, or if it is like a hieroglyphics or an entranceway or something like that, because this is such a massive structure, and the mountains help and the composition help to show it as massive, but the details don't quite give it that massive feel yet, just because of you're using kind of giant concrete, which kind of works in this alien way. But the thing that helps the most with the scale is these divots that you have going on in here. And I think more of those finer details will just make this thing even more epic. Yeah, it's awesome, dude. Cool. Speaking of Maxim's course, has VR affected or improved your workflow in any way? I've kind of managed to duck away from the VR stuff in his course. He hasn't called me out on it yet, but my time's running out. I know I'm like so hesitant to do VR, and eventually I'm going to have to do it. But so far, I've kind of just focused on the design stuff that he's teaching and just trying to make cool architecture. And then question 3, how do you create some color variation of an image? Most matte paintings work have monochromatic colors. Is that normal or needs something more complicated color variation? I think there is definitely that thing where there's a lot of matte paintings that are monochromatic, but I think also there's a lot of matte paintings that have a lot more subtle colors. When you're doing illustration, there's a whole rule around the color palette of like, okay, maybe you want to add, like, close off part of the palette and choose part of your palette for the shadows and part of your palette for the highlights. And you can definitely apply that to matte painting. But I think also a lot of matte paintings are trying to be photographic, and you don't see a ton of saturation, like pumped up saturation, right? Like if we wanted to add a little more color to this whole thing, and get a little more vibrant with it. Or actually, let me do the reverse of this. So I'll warm up the highlights, and I'll cool down those shadows. I think it's just matte paintings work a lot of the times more subtle in their color palettes, not so much monochromatic. But I think a lot of that is just like find a photo reference and base it off of that. I think this looks pretty realistic and pretty beautiful. It's definitely not rich and vibrant in colors, but I don't think that was the mood or the point that Salo was going for. And I think a lot of the times if you try to go too saturated, you start to lose those photographic elements. If you are feeling like it's too monochromatic, you should check your color corrections and maybe not go too heavy on them. You can see there are a lot of colors going on here. And if I wanted to reintroduce those types of colors into this painting, one of the things I would do is first of all, I'd have a photo reference handy so that I could know what colors are actually appearing. And then what I would do is things like this, where I can grab a color. Let's take this red, for instance, or this purplish red. A little more yellow in there. And let's say I just start like laying out these colors, and then I start to introduce variations within this like kind of color breakup map. And you'd want to do this based on your elements. But then what I can do is hit blending options and kind of isolate this just to the highlights. And throw maybe color on this and take down the opacity a little bit. And that just starts to bring in a little bit of variation into these different things. And that's just one way that you can start to introduce a bit more color variation if your painting is starting to feel a little too monochromatic. And once you have this map, I can go in here and start to add other colors into here. So maybe I want some of these rocks to have a bit more yellow or warm tones in them. Or maybe not. Maybe I want just the structure to have some warmer tones. I can start to play with that on this kind of highlight map, and you can do the same thing for a shadow map. Maybe it is like getting cool tones in the sky and the environment, and then getting these warm tones in this in this structure. And we can play with just where it lands on the hue to see what's working. But I think a lot of that just comes down to the artist and what the mood that they're going for. And I think this, the colors in Sava's painting are pretty awesome. I wouldn't want to change those. Yeah, dude, I'll send this back to you, Sava. Yeah, here, this is, here's the before and after. It's just getting that lighting, getting that sky. Those are kind of the only things I would, and paying attention to your lighting on all the other elements to just make sure they're consistent. Awesome. What's the best way you can control darker values in a painting? I keep getting crushed in JPEG. When I adjust levels, it only seems to wash everything out. Any tips? Yeah, I mean, here's a quick one for something like right in here. A lot of the times the element that you're using is crushed and you just don't have the information in there. So first of all, you gotta be careful with that. Use the right elements that have a lot of range. But the other thing you can do is I'm just gonna duplicate this. I'm gonna invert it, reverse the hue. What is it, soft light it? There you go. Now you can mask that out. And if you just don't have that information in the shadows, that's a quick way where you can start to bring back that information. Yeah, this is getting a little crushed, so we can bring that stuff back in. And I'll do that again for you guys, just in case you missed it. I'll duplicate an element, I'll invert it, Control I. I'll swap the hue, because I inverted the values, but I don't want to invert the hue. So I'll just, you know, minus 180 on that, and then hit soft light. And that is bringing back a lot of that values in your shadows. That's kind of a last case scenario. But, you know, usually I just try to find elements that have a lot more range. Yeah, you can also use the histogram as well to see if your overall values are getting completely crushed. Do you have any videos on YouTube, speed art tutorials? I don't. The only, I mean, I have a bunch of these Twitch streams where I'm going through paintings from beginning to end, and then I have the Learn Squared course. Cool. Well, let's jump into the next painting. So I'll save this out for you. So this is from Gordon Neal. It's pretty cool. He hit me up and was just like, hey, like I want to do matte painting. So I gave him an assignment, just something to, a lot of the times it's hard when you have a blank canvas and you don't know what to do. And so I told him to do kind of a World War II research facility. And this is what he came up with, which I think was pretty cool. I like the idea and you know, he definitely got the architecture working well, you know, very much of the style. Yeah, but I'm sorry, Gordon. I'm about to just kind of go through everything. You know, I know you did this in a rush, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to call everything out and see what we can do to take this up to the next level. It's a fantastic start. I just think you got to go a bit further with it. And just on an overall image, you know, I like to work really zoomed out, so that I can see where my eye is going to in a painting. Like you can blur your eyes a little bit and make it a little fuzzy. But you know, one of the core things that needs to be fixed first is there's no focal point. You know, I don't know where I'm supposed to look. We have this blimp that's pulling my eye. We have this character which kind of disappears, but he has some bright highlights. These two flags are clearly like drawing your attention, but then you have these blown out windows and you know, this blown out light. and it's kind of all almost equal in terms of what's calling your attention, or what the focal point is. So your eye doesn't know, it must, where to look, and doesn't have a strong path to follow. And that a lot of the times can make a painting feel overwhelming. So you don't really know, you're not being guided through a painting. And so I think the first thing to figure out in this painting is, what is our focal point? And what I would think is, our focal point would be probably these flags. Like, if this is all a decision we can make. We could make the focal point this blend. But I think for this, if the idea is this research facility of some cause, then we want the flags to be our first read. Actually, honestly, the door, it's in the center. We want this to be our first read. And then we want our second read to be these flags. And then we want maybe our third read to be the massive facility around it. What that gives us is a beginning, middle, and end. First we're staring right at the entrance, and you could tell it to yourself like a story. You could walk through your focal points like a story. We're staring at the entrance, or we're about to go into this place. What is this place? This place is, the Iron Cross, and it is a giant facility. That's a 1, 2, 3 read. And so if we start from that, then what we can start to do is play with our light and contrast in a way that emphasizes these focal points in that order. With that in mind, what I want to do is I want to take this background and I want to tone it down so that it's no longer a focus. We'll do something like that. And now that background isn't fighting our attention, now we can focus way more on the actual facility. And then the next thing, let's take down the focus of everything outside of these flags. Now let's tone that down. And now you can see already we're starting to hone in on where we want our focal point to be. And I'm also right now outside, like this is all very warm, but I'm going to cool that down. And now that that's toned down, let's take these flags and really everything outside the entrance. Let's tone that down. And again, let's cool that off. And now just from that, we've kind of taken from I don't know where to look, and just a couple levels adjustments, we're like, okay, we're focused in on this entranceway. And I think, then the other thing is these bright blown out lights, they're hurting quite a bit. They're hurting the focus. So let's just tone these down. And for now, I'll just take them out. And we'll add them back in later on. But we want to add lighting once everything else is working and once the composition and the focal points are all working really nicely. You get a lot of these straight matte lines as well, so that comes with once all this other stuff is in play, it's about just getting a clean clean file that doesn't have too many of those. I'm gonna do this pretty rough, just since I don't have too many layers. Actually, I just have a flat JPEG, so I'm gonna rough all this in. There we go. So just taking those out also, like right away, helps you focus in on that center point. It doesn't mean you can't have lights in there. It just means that if you're going to do lights there, you want to make sure that you do it in a way that doesn't take away your focal point. Same thing with that floodlight. We'll just blend that in quick. So just those patches. Now we're like, okay, we're focused in on this entrance. And in general, I think I'm actually going to end up taking out a couple more of your lights. Because what we want to do is, if we're going to add a light, we really want to focus on that light and what it's hitting and why it's there, and what it's doing to the composition. I'll quickly just grab the smudge tool so I can straighten this stuff out. Cool. Silly question. Back in shitty art school, I was taught it was bad practice to make dead center of a piece the focal point. Seems BS, or just on case basis, right? Yeah, dude, there's nothing wrong with making the center of a painting the focal point. I mean, some compositions are symmetrical, some are rule of thirds, some are none of those. You know, it's really about understanding where placing the focal point, like what that does to an image. You know, you could, if you put a focal point on the bottom of an image versus the top of an image, it has two very different emotions and feelings to it. And the center of an image versus the side of an image is very different. I always tell people that if you want to realize why all compositions, like there's nothing, just like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you try watching Mr. Robot and take a look at the compositions in that show, you know, they follow none of the rules, but they're so powerful. And it's because they know what they're doing with that stuff. They know by putting a character on the bottom left looking off screen, that makes you feel this sense of unimportance of them, or that they're just kind of almost existentially empty. By putting a focal point in this strong symmetry in this painting, actually I think this composition works well because it feels grand and it feels precise, and that works with this. By having this strong line and everything very blocky and surrounding it like bookends, it gives you a very strong emotion attached to this place, and also it gives you an iconic shape that's very precise and bold. And so I think the composition here works really well, and I think the idea that you shouldn't put your focal point somewhere on a canvas is silly. I think it's more about you need to understand what putting a focal point somewhere does to a painting and what the emotion that it brings to it. So now that we have this, I'm going to go and just kind of do a little bit to tone down where we had lights before, because I want to start from scratch with these lights, and kind of show you how I would approach it. The other thing I'm going to do is just, we just got done talking about monochromatic, but I'm going to tone down the colors here. Because right now, what I'm trying to do is light the building for this dark blue ambient sky, right? We're basing everything off of the sky, and this is the sky we have, so without lights, this is, we don't have a lot of color being interjected into here. So I want to neutralize that, and then we add color with the lights that are bringing that color to it. And we can keep that a little softer so that we're working around the natural colors of the structure. Like we'll have a little more red and purple in these flags. But if a strong green or a strong red isn't being lit, then you're not really going to have it there. The other thing on this is if you have bright reflections, and that might have been a light before, but it looks like a reflection. If it's nighttime, the only thing you're reflecting is lights, so you won't really have those bright sky reflections. The reflections that you have will be reflecting the lights in the scene. And now that we've gotten this kind of taken care of, now we want to bring back in our light. And, one of the ways we can do that, a lot of the times if I have an original element, I'll bring the original element back on top and mask that in. With something like this, we have a little bit too much of the lens flares baked in, but, just to give the idea, we can start to paint back in, these lights however we want them. If we don't have light in here, then what I'll do a lot of the times is do a color correction and color correct it to be, in the values of the bright lit areas. And then I'll mask that in. So let's try something like this. And then we want to paint the shape, the source and the shape of the light. So if I have, let's say we have these lights just even emanating from the inside. How's that going to hit this flag? And then we kind of trace the source of the light. Like maybe we're going to get a highlight on the edge of the flag, and maybe we'll get some spill on that flag. And maybe we have another light specifically pointed at the flag, maybe from behind this wall. So here, we can squeeze our brush in and kind of have this uplight coming in. And I'll delete it from behind this wall. And now we actually have a light that feels like it's connected to a source. It's the same thing with these pillars and these walls. We want this light connected to a source, and we want that fall off to feel natural. So if right now these lights are assuming that they're lit from the bottom, as if they have kind of, a lot of places have these lights in the front lawn that kind of shape the building in some way by lighting it in a specific way. And then from there we can start to go in and paint the highlights that light source would give us. They would give us that bottom light underneath these windowsills or on these ridges. And those highlights would fade as we get further away from the light source. But now, rather than throwing lights everywhere, we have lighting with a purpose. And we have lighting that makes sense, where we're following the source of the light and moving it up around. And then if we then wanted to go back and actually light up a window, we can go in here. We don't want to blow out the entire window. We can find photo reference of an interior too, and that usually helps a lot. But if you're just sketching this out, you want to also keep in mind the source of your light. So, do we have a light bulb in here that we can visibly see, and then that's casting a light around? And then we have a stronger source from there. And then what's that doing? Is that lighting up the roof and the walls? Or do we want to do something where the light source is maybe off camera, or out of view? So we have kind of a raking light coming in through here, and then that raking light, again following the path of the light, would light up the roof or the ceiling, and maybe we get light on that back wall. And then from there, now what's that doing to the outside? Maybe now we're getting a highlight on those window edges, and maybe that's spilling over and catching the pillar a little bit. But I think in general, what we want to make sure is that when we're adding lights in here, that we're really following the path of the light. Like this light right here, is this lighting up this sigil? Or this, and then is that hitting this facade? And then are we getting highlights from it? And is that fall off right? And when we want to put a light in there, we really just want to make sure that we integrate it in, and the way to integrate it in is really following the path of the light. That's how we add lights in a realistic way. But and then on top of that, just making sure that the lights we're adding are there for a purpose and support the composition. Because what we don't want to do is throw a bunch of lights in there that starts to take our eye away from the story that we want to tell in this painting. You know, whatever that may be. And then on top of that, then these foreground pieces, if there's no light source coming in and hitting this, like maybe you can justify that the light bouncing off the building is hitting it, but if you have rocks right up against a wall, then this isn't going to get hit by light. You know, and this is taking us away from our focal point. So maybe we want to tone all of this down. And then this light has to be hitting this pavement. Yeah, I think this painting is first of all, it's very ambitious, and you've done a killer job with the design of it. I think with the execution, you're definitely making things hard on yourself with the amount of stuff you're adding into here. And what might help a lot is to find a base photograph that you can base your lighting and colors off of. Because going straight for it like this is a very, very difficult thing. If I were to do this matte painting from scratch, I would definitely first find photo reference with the type of lighting that I was trying to capture, and then really study it and see where are the lights and how are they interacting with the buildings, and how are they interacting with the ground and the structures and stuff like that. And also for sure starting with what is the purpose of the painting. What do I want to tell? What story am I telling here? And where do I want to really place the emphasis and the focal points throughout the entire thing? And again, and then once you get those things figured out, when it comes down to the technical execution of it, it's really get all your elements working with that ambient night sky first, and make sure that your composition's working, and then treat each light as a very individual thing that you're adding in, and make sure that you're following the path of the light when you add it in. If you do have this light up here, how is that affecting this archway? Is it going to backlight it? You have this uplight from this from this kind of foyer area. And is that working in here? Trying to see if there's any other questions out there that y'all have. I think for this I've covered everything that I wanted to cover on here. I think Gordon, dude, you did something super ambitious and you turned around super quick. I think that as you keep practicing and start paying attention to these things, you're going to find it actually becomes easier and faster. and your paintings, just by focusing on composition and lighting, you're gonna see a huge growth curve. You're gonna shoot through the roof. This is fantastic, and hopefully I wasn't too harsh on you with the critique, but I want you to learn, so I wanna throw everything at you. Cool, guys. I'm trying to think if we have time to do one more. What do you guys think? You want to do one more? How you guys feeling? You guys have questions? Anything that anything you want to see or know, or techniques that you want to know? Hell yeah, one more. Cool. I'll do one more. Cool, and Neil, if you're watching, I'm going to send this over to you. Awesome stuff, really great stuff. I don't know. I'm answering questions for everyone except for Nick Hyatt. He's not allowed to. He's not allowed to learn this stuff. If you haven't seen Nick's work, by the way, you should check it out. Nick Hyatt's an amazing matte painter, but don't tell him I said that, and I'm going to deny it. Cool. So this is a painting from Josh Calloway. He also did the matte painting course and sent this over to me. And it took me by surprise. I just got this one day. I was like, oh my God, this is cool. Super cool. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to do a little paint over on here, because there's so much that's working with it, and I think we can I think we can step it up a notch. The thing, this is closer in terms of composition, but again, I think we can do a lot more to move the eye to the right places. And I think we have this really cool lava stuff happening here, but because it's so bright, we're losing it. It's not having as much of an impact or an effect that it could have. So I'm gonna quickly just mask some things out so we have a little bit of control, because I think color correction is gonna help this a lot. I like this character too. I don't know where he got it. Maybe, I know John Sweeney's been putting out a ton of photos of different people in costumes. I don't know if this is one of them, but it's pretty cool. Final tech check. I'm trying to even think of how to show that off. I mean, I use a levels adjustment on top of everything to check the blacks and check the highlights and saturations and sharpness. Go and check. I guess I do have a checklist. It's like, make sure that all the values are correct. Make sure that the lighting is right and that everything is justified within the lighting. Check all the elements and make sure that the sharpness and the blur and the masks are right for each element. Make sure that the grain, that there's not a shit ton of noise on some element and not on another. Yeah, it's kind of something I haven't even really thought about or broken down, but I guess I do have like a, intuitive checklist. Get these mountains. That's the Master Sword from Zelda. Oh, okay. I just lost huge nerd cred points. Is the if you guys know, is the statue or something from Zelda as well? Is it like is this telling a story that I don't know about? Nick, that would be awesome. I would love those actions to automate tech checks, and yeah, that would be great. While I'm doing this, what do you guys think so far? Sorry. Do you guys like the critique session, or do you guys prefer the map painting demo stuff? I mean, we don't have to stick to one or the other. I can keep switching it up, but I just haven't done one of these before, so I wanted to make sure that it's not bad for you guys, that it's not boring or anything like that. Honestly, this is pretty much what I do on the Learn Squared mentorships. With get a really good. I just finished having an awesome batch of people, and I mean, we pretty much just like Skype, get together. I take a look at their paintings, do some paint overs, and we shoot the shit for a couple hours. It's pretty fun and awesome. But yeah, it's a lot of this stuff, and for me, it's a lot of fun. So hopefully you guys like watching it. Cool. So just got this broken up so that we can really start to play with it. And the first thing I want to do is I really want to pump up this cave in here and get those get that lava like really reading. See, as soon as we darken it down, it lets that glow, it lets that pop. And then what we can do is we can still have light hitting this edge coming in, but at least the lava in our foreground is, has an opportunity in that darkness to be able to pop. And I'd want to push the glow of this lava even more in terms of how it's hitting these structures, just because it's so cool. And really like dramatize that. Get this darker to fit in. And then if we are going to have light hitting this, hitting inside this cave, one of the things that is bugging me in this painting in the first place is just the silhouette that we're getting here. It's a little too clean, a little too smooth for a rock silhouette, and it's not super interesting, honestly. Like, I think element-wise, there's definitely some better elements that could have been used for this cave, or at least something to just give a nicer shape to the whole thing. And even better if it has something that has a little bit of that lighting built in. So I'm going to try just dropping something like this in. we can just blend this in pretty quick. And what this has, which is nice, is it has a really nice blend point with the edge of this rock. And the edge of the rock is getting that light coming in. Here, I won't mess this out. I'll just do this quick. Now we can color correct this in here to work. Get a little more contrast, get this a little darker. And right now in this painting we have these red tones in here, so I'll bring that in, but I'm not actually, I'm not a fan of the color correction of these rocks. But we'll keep that in here for now. Actually, you know what I might do is actually swap that out. Because I think right now the sky it looks like an unnatural sky. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have this like white highlight with this red shadow against kind of this dark, I don't know, dark cyan sky beyond it. And it's starting, once you color correct the sky too much, you start to get into unnatural colors. And then once you do that, you're color correcting all of your images and elements to match the unnatural colors, and you can quickly spiral down. So I think it's really important to try to keep, you know, if you're going to be color correcting the sky, do it subtly. You know, you don't want to go overkill with it, because you'll just spin yourself out. So I think what we'll do is we'll swap out this sky, and we'll color correct everything to a less treated version. Let's just try that. And I'll just quickly patch this up. So let me throw a different sky in here, and then we'll color correct our cave to match that. Where do you get the images? I came in late. I get everything from Shutterstock. I don't really fuck around with anything else. And right now I'm just, honestly, I haven't opened these files up before jumping on the stream, so I'm just kind of grabbing whatever I happen to have in my downloads folder right now. Maybe something like this. I'll try one more. This one's a tricky one. What do we want this sky to do? We want a harsh light from the right. We want it daytime and warm coming in, and very heroic feeling. You know, maybe something like this. We'll go with that. It's a bonus when you get a sky that also has some landscape that kind of fits what you're going for, because you can use that to help you color correct. It's like we know that we have these kind of warmer yellows and reds in this landscape that's adjusting to the sky. So we can kind of get a little closer to that. Let's get a little more red, a little more yellow in those highlights. And then maybe a little more cyan in those shadows. Yeah, something like that I think that'll do. And then on top of that, what we want to do is now we want to emphasize the darkness coming into this cave. So I'm just gonna soft light on top just to darken up this stuff. And maybe we don't want to do too much to the top. We still want like a little bit of ambient coming in, so we can always kind of play up the top of it. And now if we want to add this kind of red fiery glow, what we can do is we can bring in just the element again. I can color correct this to look like red lava glow. And maybe we again kind of soft light this. And I can say this is lava glow. Delete that mask and start to paint that mask back in. And now I can introduce that glow back in and have some control over it. It's kind of a messy file, so I apologize, but I'm just trying to work quick. So now that gives us a bit of a better transition and a more natural rock formation to get from that cave to that outdoor area, just because we found an element that had that lighting a little closer. I'll just clean this up a little bit just so I can keep working. How are you adjusting that brush so quickly? The wheel on your Wacom? Oh, the size of the brush? If you hold, on PC, it's press Alt and right click on your pen. You can scrub left and right to change the size. So now that we have this and we have a sky that's a little more natural, now we can color correct this background image closer to what this sky and this landscape are. So just bringing in a little bit more yellows. Actually, what I want to do is there's a lot of atmosphere happening underneath right now, and I want to tone that down. So I'm just gonna color correct it and then blend that mask in. A little too much red. And it might help also to hide the cave and just look at it against the sky and see how are these colors working and what's going on here. You know, we have this red castle right now, and we have this lava. I think we'll ignore the lava for right now, and we'll go back and touch that up. But really, we want to just color correct it to the sky in this environment. And another thing, you know, when a lot of the times you're color correcting, it gets hard to see, so you can always throw that levels adjustment right on top and just crank those highlights or crank those shadows to kind of see how things are playing, you know, more dramatically. So, you know, I think we can definitely brighten the whole top of this statue. And also we can see that, you know, in the environment, we're getting all these like reds and yellows in our highlights. And then cyan's over here. I think this is probably where we want to color correct too. So that's probably what I'll do. I'll bring in a bit more of those cyans and blues, actually. And then just bring the warm tones into the highlights. And this red castle is throwing me off quite a bit, so I might just go in here and change the colors of this. Or at least tone it down a little bit. Yeah, I think just in general, and maybe it's just the JPEG that I have that was flattened out, but this stuff is just getting a little messy. There's not a lot of information in here, and it's not really color corrected together. There's a lot of different colors going on. So that's something that just could use a little more love in general, and maybe it is about finding some better elements to use in there. And you know, maybe that's something that we can do, is swap out that element. Let me see if I can find something that we can use with that castle that might be a little more appropriate. What do we got? Let's try this out. This is nice because it has that strong lighting, but I'm not sure layout wise it's going to hit what we need. So let me see if there's something else. Maybe this will do it. Really what we need is we need a mountain container to hold that castle up. It's just something for that castle to go on. Make sure that lighting is in the right direction. Give me one more shot at this and then we'll just work with whatever we got. Let's try this. What I can do too is I'll just throw this castle on top just so we can see how it'll play. that'll do for now. You know, I think with a bit of actual time searching for elements, there's probably something great that hits that story point. I know Joshua had some of these cliffs and ridges to get these kind of waterfalls of lava. You know, that's stuff that you could still add in here. You know, but I think it's going to take a little bit more image hunting, and that's something that he can do. You know, and if you wanted to have those streams coming down, type of thing, you could still have that in here. But for now, let's just focus on getting these elements, because that stuff is all the that's the finishing details, and that stuff really doesn't matter how cool of an idea you have if the image in itself isn't working yet. Cool, so we're going to play that up. What I'll do is I'll just chop off this little area. Turn off that foreground and get this color corrected in. It's actually pretty close right now, but it's a little too heavy on the atmosphere, and I want it to pop a little, come a little closer to us. So I'm going to just take a little of that blue out. And the lighting might be a little too harsh, which we can tone that down as well, since we're not getting these super strong highlights anywhere else. And you know, one of the ways we can do that is, again, doing that invert method, where we invert it, soft light it, throw that in here, and just like tone down the opacity, and that's just gonna like lift our shadows, darken our highlights. And if we want, we can even just throw a levels adjustment on that and just bring it down. And that's just softening it a bit. And then the other thing is, you know, we can just throw something on here and just blend it just to the highlights. Maybe we multiply that. Maybe throw a color on there so that we get back to this color. Not sure if that's really doing everything we want it to do, but at least it's just taking it down a notch. Let's see how this is playing. Cool. Got a little too dark. I'm just going to sharpen it a little bit, just for temporary reasons. And the last thing is, if we want to blend this into this foreground, you know, we can always darken like this area just to give it a little something to blend between our foreground area and the background. This element isn't working the best, but you know, at least it gives us something to work with. Just to give us a little bit of that light coming in also there. Anyways, we'll just keep it at that for now. the scale is going to throw it off a bit. It's not as much scale in that mountain. But anyways, let's get this castle just working. Now with this, without dealing with the castle stuff, we can start to take a look at some of the other colors that are just popping in here a little too much. And we just have these super strong reds and greens. And what's tough about when you have super strong reds and greens is they're on opposites. You know, I can't turn down the cyans without bringing in more reds. I can't turn down the reds without bringing in more cyans. So you really have to like play with it quite a bit when you have both of those. And it's really easy to just neutralize both of them, and then it becomes monochromatic. You know, I think this is one of those things where the raw element, right now it's been color corrected and lost a lot of the info on it. So it might be something worth going back to the raw element and just killing the color corrections on them. So at this point, we're just gonna end up neutralizing it. But we'll get the values working. We'll add some atmosphere. Get these warm tones and these cool tones. Anyways, that I could spend a lot more time trying to get that working, but we'll just move on to get this last element in here. These last rocks, and just color correct these down. What I really want to do is grab this this background color that's on the horizon and just introduce that a little bit to there. Anyways, this is before, after. I think we definitely could spend a lot more time on this, but I think this takes it, at least hopefully gives some info on things that could be improved on. And I think a big part of it is the sky that threw you off, Joshua. Once the sky becomes unnatural, everything else follows, because your integration into this unnatural sky is good, but it doesn't look realistic because of that. I think finding a more natural sky and don't color correct it too much, and then finding some more natural elements that give you that nice blend point, you know, and that have that lighting that you're looking for, so that you're not trying to cheat that lighting in into an element that just doesn't have it baked in. Composition-wise, I think this is a really cool painting, and I hope that you keep working on it and take it up a notch, because I think if you spend a couple more hours on it and made a couple of these adjustments, it could be really awesome. Cool. Let me check if there's any other questions. Otherwise, I will leave it here. Do you or did you hide Easter eggs in your work? Yeah, I used to put penguins in just about everything. I think there's a lot of VFX artists who put penguins in things. But these days, I haven't done that in years. It's just, usually I'm just crunching to get through a painting, so I don't really have a lot of time to just sit through and spend time on Easter eggs. So I'd rather just jump on to the next painting. Do you ever run out of photos? For instance, if you do a lot of the same sort of matte paintings, is it hard to continually find new reference without using the same photos over and over? Usually even if I'm doing similar types of matte paintings, like let's say I'm doing like tons of fantasy caves or whatever, each time I'll try to base it off of a different location in the world, just to keep things fresh. And I think with Shutterstock, it's nearly impossible to run out of photos. So yeah, no, I've never had that It's not the penguin with the hat. Penguin with the animal, the penguin. How do you approach depth of field in something like this? I think with matte paintings, you don't want to bake depth of field in. Maybe you do with concept art. And I'm not even sure, if you were photographing this, you probably wouldn't have depth of field because you'd probably be shooting this with a really wide lens. So I'm not sure you'd have that much of it. In terms of atmosphere and handling that, because it's not laid out in 3D space, it's not like you have a render with actual like physically accurate depth in it. So I think one of the best things you can do is find a photo reference like this. I think this is a super strong way to go about this, and use that levels checker and really see if your highlights and shadows are falling off, or really if your shadows are falling off correctly, if it feels right. And are these maybe this castle right now is supposed to be the same distance as like this first ridge, so are the shadows falling off at the same time? And it's close, maybe it's a little too dark, but that's how I'd go about depth of field with this stuff. Where can I learn to draw like that? I haven't done any drawing here, so and I really don't encourage you to learn how to draw like me. It's been a long time since I've drawn, so I'm not amazing at that. But I would say that if you are looking to draw, really spend some time with figure drawing. That's like the best way to get better and faster at connecting your hand to your eye. Cool, guys. Unless there's any other questions, I think we'll call it a day and wrap this up. Just to show the before and after again. Thank you to Sava, Neil, and Joshua for letting me tear you apart in this stream. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of it. And I think you guys are all awesome people. So keep it up and keep doing awesome work. And I would love to see either these paintings continue or your next round. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys. Have an amazing Tuesday, and I will see you guys next week. Cheers.